Cookies are just one of the best, quickest, most portable, and satisfying handheld snacks. Check out these chocolate-covered, orange-zested shortbread cookies that are sandwiched with a rich and creamy dulce de leche filling. Variations of this cookie are popular all over the Americas south of the US border. I'm sharing my version of the Argentine Alfajores cookies. The alfajor, which means sandwich cookie, is a food idea thought to date back to the Middle East during the 8th century. At that time, the cookie likely consisted of dough filled with dried fruit preserves and rolled in sugar or nuts. The Moors are thought to have introduced it to Spain, who created a version rolled in almonds and powdered sugar, closer to the version we eat today. The Spaniards took their version to South America during the 16th century, where countries and regions modified it to make it their own. Needless to say, these incredibly rich and indulgent sweet treats have stood the test of time, crossed continents, and improved with cultural influences. A big thanks to Argentina for sharing their versions that many of us love today and being the inspiration for mine. For the ingredients, you'll need all-purpose flour, cornstarch, baking powder, baking soda, butter, salt, only if using unsalted butter, powdered sugar, egg yolks, vanilla, milk of any kind, zest from an orange, dulce de leche filling, either store-bought or homemade. I'm actually using homemade, chocolate chips or a bar, and shortening. We'll start by making the shortbread cookie dough. To get a head start and save on time, you can make the dough the night before the day you want to bake the cookies. That's what I'm doing, and you really only need an hour between the time you make the dough and roll them out to bake. In a large bowl, we're going to sift together 120 grams, which is 1 cup of all-purpose flour. To that, we're going to add 128 grams, which is 1 cup of cornstarch. We're going to add 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and if you were using unsalted butter, then add 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I am using salted butter, so I'm not going to add any additional salt here. Okay, dispose of what's left over. And then just do a quick whisk to make sure everything is well incorporated. Okay, and we're going to set this aside. To another large bowl, we're going to add 8 tablespoons of butter that's softened. If you did not leave your butter out to soften, then you could always just dice it up in the bowl, stick it in the microwave for 10 seconds or so until it's softened. And then we're just going to beat it until it's creamy. Okay, now we're going to add 60 grams, which is 1/2 cup of powdered sugar. I'm going to add it slowly so the sugar doesn't fly out. You could use your hands or a spatula or a stand mixer for all this. I just find using a hand mixer just easy. Our butter and sugar are nice and creamy. So now we're going to add 2 egg yolks, and we're going to add these one at a time. And you want to separate your eggs first, making sure that you get the yellow out from the white, and then just save the white for something else. I will probably use that in an omelet later. And if you can, without dumping both of them in, just one at a time and mix. Another second. Then we're going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 2 tablespoons of milk for a little bit of moisture that this cookie is going to need. And if you choose to add orange zest, which I love in this recipe, I think orange, chocolate, and dulce de leche go very well together. So for me, this orange zest is a must, but you don't have to use it. It's strictly optional. And then you're going to add 1 zested orange to this recipe. And then mix until well incorporated. So notice that we used egg yolks in here instead of 1 full egg. And that's because egg yolks are a binding ingredient and they add flavor and help to brown the cookie. So you don't want to use a full egg in this recipe because the egg white will be sticky. And we really don't want a sticky dough. That's not the desired texture in this cookie. Our wet ingredients are mixed well. Okay, that's a good mixture. Oh, that orange smells amazing. It's so fresh and it adds such a nice freshness to this rich cookie that we're making. Now add the flour mixture so you can just put it on top since we've already sifted it. Should be nice and well dispersed there. So you can start out with a spatula if you want, but I love to mix this with my hands. And of course, if you have a stand mixer, you can use that as well. You just want to ensure that you don't overmix the dough. So Argentine Alfajores cookies are made with all sorts of different ingredients. In fact, in Peru, they put cornmeal in the cookie. They vary from region to region and country to country in the Americas. Okay, this is a little bit of a sticky dough. I mean, notice I do have dough in my fingers, but I can pick it up and it's not sticking to my hands, so this is just right. But if you find yours is too sticky, just add another tablespoon of flour as you're mixing it. Remove the dough from the bowl and place it on some plastic wrap. Now, I'm going to use cookie cutters and roll my dough out, but if you don't want to take the time to use cookie cutters, divide this dough in half, roll into a log in 2 separate plastic wraps until it's 2 centimeters in diameter, and then you can just cut it like you were just making rolled cookies, about 1/4 inch apart, and that would be super simple. I have the directions in the recipe and below the video, but if you want to roll cookies out like I want to do, which is traditional of the Alfajores cookies, that's what we're going to do. So you want to place the dough in a disc like this, cover it well with plastic wrap tightly, and we're going to place this in the fridge for at least an hour to overnight, so that it firms up. As soon as it's firmed up, then you can roll it out, then it's ready. Our dough is nice and firm, as you can tell. If your dough is too firm to roll out because you left it in the fridge overnight, just let it sit at room temperature on the counter for about 30 minutes or so until it softens up a little, and then it'll be perfect to roll out. Now, if you rolled your dough into logs, so you have a nice round log that you put in the refrigerator to firm up, then at that point, once it's really, really firm, you would take it out, unwrap it, of course, and then just slice your dough into 1/4 inch slices, and then place them on the cookie sheet like I'm about to explain for the rolled out version, and then just follow the normal directions. That's the easy way. It's totally up to you. So to get started, before rolling these out, let's go ahead and preheat our oven to 350 degrees, and you want to prepare 2 baking sheets, and you want to align each one with a sheet of parchment paper. If you've got one of those French silpats, you can use that. So you're going to need cookie cutters for this. They need to be 2 inches in diameter, and this is what a 2 inch in diameter looks like. Now, I've made these cookies with a pretty crinkly edge. It works great if you're not going to coat them. So if you make these cookies and you want to coat them in chocolate, you can't see the crinkles. But if you're going to dip partial in chocolate, then you can use the crinkle and you can still see the pretty crinkly edges on the sugar cookie. I'm also, for fun, going to use a heart shape because they are the same size as my round one, and it also produces a pretty cookie. So Valentine's Day, or for a treat for your kids to show them that you love them, particularly in their lunch boxes, you can leave one of these with heart shapes. That's kind of cool. But you want to start with a floured surface. Now, here's something I've learned over the years. Anytime I cut out cookies, roll cookies, I always put flour down, right? But then I always add some granulated sugar. The granulated sugar actually does a couple of things. Number one, it won't dry out the exterior of the cookie as it bakes because you've got that little sweetness that's mixed in with the flour, and it's not all flour that can really absorb that moisture. But also, it gives a little bit of friction on our work surface, and it keeps the dough from sticking too much because there's that little bit of barrier of sugar between the surface and the dough. Not only that, it sort of caramelizes the exterior of the dough as it bakes when you got that little bit of sparkly sugar hanging out on the outside. We want to do the same with our rolling pin in that we want to add a little bit of sugar and flour, and then you just start to roll out your dough. We're going to roll this out to 1/4 inch thick. You don't want to roll these out any thicker than 1/4 inch thick because when these bake in the oven, they are going to rise. You can press it together if it starts to break apart there. And when you put 2 thicker cookies together to make a sandwich, you've got this really big cookie with a layer of Dulce de Leche, and it's coated in chocolate, so your cookies are going to end up huge, like thick. We don't really want that size, although they don't taste bad, it's just they're huge. So I would recommend 1/4 inch. Once they're rolled out, take a cookie cutter and then just start making rounds. If I'm using a couple different shapes, is try to do 2 of the same shape and then move to the other one and make sure I use 2 of that shape. That way I get the same shape so that I have a top and a bottom to my cookies. And then as you cut them out, you can just place them on your cookie sheet. They're gonna rise, but they're not gonna spread in the oven. So you can place maybe 4 or 5 in a row on like I think this is about a 17 by 12 inch cookie sheet. So you can get quite a few. Just about 1/2 inch is really all you need to separate them. And then for fun, to show you what the crinkly ones look like, we'll do 2 of those. I'm able to get 20 cookies on one cookie sheet. And so now that I have this cookie sheet filled, we're gonna put in the oven, let them bake for 12 to 14 minutes. And in the meantime, we're just gonna fill up that second cookie sheet so that one will be ready to go when the first set comes out of the oven. All right, once you've cut out all the cookies you can get from that roll of dough, then just go ahead and pick up all of the dough pieces that are left, and you're gonna do the same thing. Knead it just a little bit to get it back into that smooth, round shape, and roll back out to 1/4 inch thick. Okay, my first batch of cookies just came out of the oven, and notice that thickness is just right for creating sandwiches. As you can see, they're not too thick. While this one cools in the rack for 2 minutes, now we're gonna bake our second batch of cookies for 12 minutes. 12 minutes seems to be ideal in my oven. After about 2 minutes of the cookies cooling on the pan, go ahead and put them on a cooling rack. They need to cool completely before we fill them with Dulce de Leche. Take a look at the heart-shaped cookies. Even though the edges were crinkly, they're harder to tell once they bake. So once your cookies have cooled, what I like to do is just go ahead and pair them up and just make sure you've got the right shapes together. But what I love about the orange is I can smell the orange, but then you can see the orange zest speckled throughout the cookie, and they smell so nice. All right, so now we're gonna add the Dulce de Leche. This is Dulce de Leche that I made at home. You can use store-bought or you can use homemade. What I have found with Dulce de Leche for these cookies is you really want a thick Dulce de Leche. Now this was made with sweetened condensed milk and cooked in the slow cooker for 10 hours to get that dark color and that caramel flavor. The stove version, where you make it from scratch, is a little bit thinner. I find sweetened condensed milk that's been caramelized a better, sturdier substance for these cookies. So then take the bottom of one cookie, you're going to dollop. So you just do a nice little spread, and then you take the bottom of the top, and then you just sandwich them together. And there you go. Now at this point, we're going to just put them aside, but you could roll the edges in coconut or sprinkles or a colored sugar, and then just serve them like this. They don't have to be covered. I mean, they'd be nice just with the orange flavoring, but we're gonna add chocolate because I love the Argentine Havana style cookies. All right, again, a nice little dollop, and then you sandwich them together. It's a pretty cookie, isn't it? Just like that. You could stop right there and go ahead and eat it if you wanted to. And then we're gonna do this for the rest of the cookies. So now it's time to make the chocolate coating. And in the meantime, I put my cookies in the refrigerator. They're all filled and ready to go. I just wanted to make sure the Dulce de Leche stays cool. You could make the chocolate coating in one of two ways. First of all, you want 12 to 16 ounces of chocolate in a glass bowl. You may find that 12 ounces is not enough, so I think I have 14 ounces in here. A typical bag of chocolate chips is 12 ounces. You might find you need a little bit more than that. But then you need 2 tablespoons of shortening. Shortening is great because it keeps the chocolate smooth and it adds a little bit of glistening to the chocolate when they're covered and they've dried. So now you could either fill a saucepan with water, enough water that the water comes up to a part way up the glass bowl. You put it over the stove, you put it on low heat, you set your glass bowl in it, and the heat from the water as it starts to simmer will heat up the chocolate. And then you just stir it until it's melted, and then you can start dipping your cookies with this over on the stove on low heat. Now, I prefer a little bit quicker method, which is the microwave method. So that's what we're gonna do for this. And I'm gonna stick this in the microwave for a minute, stir. I'm gonna put it back in for another 30 seconds and stir and continue doing 30-second increments until the chocolate is melted. Okay, my chocolate is nice and melted. I had it in there for a minute. I stirred it, 30 seconds and stirred it, and it was all melted, but I added another 15 seconds just to make sure it's nice and smooth and runny because we don't want it to be too thick on the cookie. So you may need to stop periodically and stick this in the microwave for about 10 to 15 seconds just to make sure it stays nice and smooth. I'm using a spoon and a fork. I found that works best in the cookies. And notice all of our cookies have been filled with the Dulce de Leche. And so then I have another cookie sheet with wax paper. And that's where we're gonna place the cookies once we put chocolate on them. So you wanna grab one sandwich cookie. You could dip half of the cookie like this, shake off the extra chocolate, and then you could just put it on the cookie sheet like that, and you could have half dipped, right? or you could just dip the whole thing. And so with that, just put it in the chocolate so it gets all covered. I like to use a fork. It's pretty easy to lift it out with a fork. You want to hit against the bowl to get the excess chocolate off. And then I find with a knife, just lifting it off onto the wax paper. Okay, and we're going to do this for all the cookies. So check this out. I just remembered that I had some white chocolate in my freezer, so I melted it. And you could do this like you would with maybe some chocolate covered strawberries. Take a little bit of melted white chocolate and then just add a drizzle over your cookie just to add like more of a color to it if you wanted to have a little contrasting color. Once you've dipped all your cookies, you can now place them in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes to let them harden up. In fact, they're already starting to harden up on the first ones that I've done, and the last ones are still pretty wet. If you want to add different decorations, you can sprinkle over chopped nuts on top before they harden. You could also add sugar, powdered sugar, kind of a crystallized colored sugar, candy even, caramel pieces to show that that's what's on the inside. There are lots of options. I'm going pretty simple here. Let's take a closer look. So once they have hardened and cooled, they're just a great handheld cookie, right? All right, so let's cut one of these in half and get a closer look. So we'll take this one and see what the inside looks like. Notice it actually cuts through pretty easily, so it's not a super hard cookie. Let's look at the ratio of everything. I think the chocolate has a good amount of thickness. It's not too thick, it's not too thin. You've got that nice shortbread. Now shortbread's not a very strong flavor, so I think you need more of shortbread than the others to balance it out. So you'll have a nice little crunch in there, and you've got a good amount of dulce de leche there. So overall, this is a good cookie for the ratios of all three. And it holds easily together. So it makes it an easy cookie to eat. What an indulgent cookie to satisfy that chocolate or sugar craving. Sandwich cookies never go out of style. You know, Argentines love their alfajores like Americans love their Oreos. Although personally, I would pick an alfajor over an Oreo any day, but that's my opinion. Thanks for watching. Your support in subscribing, liking, and sharing is much appreciated. Until next time, go bake the world.